Okay, so we are back for the second episode of the Arch Party's 2024 horror preview. So, um, a little refresher. Back toward the end of last year, Becky reached out and said, "Hey, you should do an episode looking forward. It's kind of your thing, and we could get together with Emily and talk about books that we're looking forward to." And then, even more wisely, was like, "But let's just do the first half of the year." I don't know if it was you or Emily. One of you guys was smart enough to say we shouldn't do the whole year all at once. And so we did a great selection of January through June, where we talked about the books that we're looking forward to that posted up in January. And now, since it is, a handful of days before July, we figured we might as well talk about the second half of the year. So that's where we are right now. I'm joined again by Becky Spratford and Emily Hughes, and I'm going to ask you both just to kind of give a quick introduction of yourselves. Give a quick introduction of yourselves. Remind everybody who you are, where you kind of fit into the world of horror, and then we'll talk about. I think we have 34 to 40 something kind of books that we're going to talk about as well. So lots of books to talk about, but just a little refresher. Let's start with. I'm just going by first name alphabetical, so we're going to start with Becky.
Great. Hi, I'm Becky Spratford. I am a reviewer for Booklist and Library Journal, and actually on July 1st as well, my genre preview comes out with Library Journal, so that'll be a full column with some of the titles that we're talking about, and then a full list of all the titles you could look forward to, which I did with help from Emily's lovely list, which we'll talk about. And hopefully they keep her quote in there. I won't know till I see the final on July 1st. But so I do reviewing for Booklist and Library Journal. I'm a librarian. I train library staff all over the world on how to match books with readers through the public library in all genres. But of course, horror is my specialty. I have 3 textbooks for librarians on that topic. The most recent is the Reader's Advisory Guide to Horror, 3rd edition. And then I recently signed a contract. Well, recently have a contract. We'll talk about the signing in a little bit. I recently have a contract with Saga Press to put out a version of my ongoing blog series, Why I Love Horror, with 18 authors, including some of the authors we're going to talk about today. And that will be coming out with their essays about why they love horror in September of 2025. And I'm also, thank you, Rob. I'm also, because it's relevant to the time period, I'm also have the joy of being on the advisory committee for the Shirley Jackson Award, which is a super fun job because basically I get to tell the jury what they should read and they have to listen to me, which is fantastic. But I don't have to judge, which is hard. I've done that before for awards. And that's going to be announced real soon, too, in July. So that's why I'm putting that on the radar there.
Awesome. Always love to hear all of the amazing wisdom that's in your brain. Yeah, you're kind of like, you too are my North Stars for like what is going on with horror. So always humbled to be in your presence. Emily, how about you?
How about me? Hi, I'm Emily Hughes. I worked on the publishing side of the business for, a dozen years. And towards the tail end of that period, I was working exclusively on horror with Tor Nightfire. Now I am off on my own, doing my own thing. I have my first book will be out. This is a finished copy. Look at these beautiful French flaps.
Love the French flaps.
The 2-color interior. Oh, I'm just thrilled. Horror for Weenies, coming out September 3rd from Quark. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. One of the other things I do, and actually kind of how Becky and I initially got connected, is that I maintain a completely insane running list of the year's new horror releases over on my website, readjumpscares.com. I basically found myself frustrated with the lack of a central database for horror titles. And so I made one, and it's, as I said, a little bit insane, but I really enjoy maintaining it. I update it at least monthly, and I have been hearing from booksellers, librarians, readers, writers, over the years that they really love it and find it really valuable. Aside from that, I write reviews and coverage. Actually, just a couple of weeks ago, had my latest review in the New York Times book review for Paul Tremblay's horror movie, so that was really
Yeah,
exciting.
cool.
Yeah, so that's me.
Very cool. Um, that's actually now on Sundays when the New York Times shows up. I pull out the book review first thing, and then I just look in the table of contents to see whose names I know, like, oh, who's reviewing stuff, and then I just jump right to those. So that's awesome. And the list that you make, I want to point out for anybody who, even if you know of it or don't know of it, one thing that I think is very useful is that there's a form you can use to submit something that you didn't see on the list. And so I like the kind of crowdsourcing element of it too. Like you can have, like, not everything is going to hit your radar. So if there's something, either it's on a small press or it's just something that you know didn't get on your list originally, people can fill out a form and say, hey, we think this should be included too. So I like that.
Yeah, and honestly, I really encourage people to use that. I do encourage people to, use the find in page, Control F function
Yes.
first on the list, because
I'm a
it's
huge
long.
fan of the Control F function on your website. Let me tell you, I might be the number one user of it.
It's people miss things. I miss things. This is sort of a patchwork series of sources that I use for this information. So I love any help people want to give me. It doesn't matter if you are an author, an agent, an editor, a marketer, a publicist, a librarian, a bookseller, or reader. I had somebody submit a title through that form recently, and there's a section for notes or like, what else do you want me to know? And they said something to the effect of, I have no like stake in this book whatsoever. I just think it sounds cool and maybe you'd want to know about it. And I was like, that to me is a big win, because it's just some random person who's like, hey, you should know about this. And that to me means I've arrived.
Yeah. I think, yeah, you've gone, it's become a cultural phenomenon. And I think a lot of people see it as an incredibly valuable resource. I mentioned the submit thing because I used it for one of the books I'm talking about tonight.
Yes.
And I did do the search function before submitting the form. So
Bless you.
I was like, of all people, I mean, I know Emily. She's gonna be like, Rob, what the hell? So
I definitely
I
would have
did.
called you out if you were
Could have
like,
just
Yeah.
emailed me.
I did my due diligence before using the form. So, in my opinion, you can't find two more knowledgeable people when it comes to horror fiction or horror. I guess I should say. I'll back it up. Horror. And so I'm so thankful that I get to do this conversation with you guys. Hopefully every 6 months. It would be great if we just kind of kept this going. Like an ongoing thing. But because we have so many books to talk to, we're probably just going to dive right in. I know last time I did some fancy, let's talk about themes and blah. No, we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to dive into it. So we are doing July through December of 2024 for the most part, and we might, kind of fudge the rules a little bit. But I believe, Emily, you're going to start out with your first pick of July.
yes, indeed. So my first pick for July is It Came from the Trees by Allie Russell. So this is a middle grade novel, which is not usually my, like, sort of within my remit. But I know Allie, she's just an absolute joy. She used to write for me over at the Nightfire site when I was running that. And this is her debut novel. It is the story of a young Black girl who is an avid hiker, camper, outdoors person, who goes on basically, functionally, it's the Girl Scouts, but it's not called that, trip with a friend, and is dealing with a number of threats, shall we say, both a racist troop leader who's not listening to her, not believing her, And also, the Bigfoot like creature that seems to be stalking the troop and abducts her best friend. And nobody believes her. Everyone thinks that her best friend wandered off, or maybe, something happened, but, non supernatural. But she won't give it up. Jenna, this girl, she is dedicated. She is resourceful. She is using every trick in her arsenal to go out there again and find her friend. And it's really wonderful. I mean, it's very heartwarming. It's got some chills, it's got some laughs. I think it is a treat, and it is a must read for anyone who has younger horror readers in their lives or is just a younger horror reader at heart.
Very cool. Becky, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'm going to be the first instance of talking about Stephen Graham Jones. I know that Rob's going to have a whole thing about it later, but so I talked about The Angel of Indian Lake at the last time, and Stephen has a book out in July as well, and it's called I Was a Teenage Slasher. First of all, I am on the record. Yes. Oh, you put your hand up.
Oh,
Okay.
I was pointing to it on my shelf. Sorry. I didn't mean
Oh,
to
sorry.
throw off
Okay,
your.
I thought I did something wrong.
No, no,
Anyway, I Was a Teenage Slasher is basically what I'm on the record as saying is it's Tolly, the character who is the teenage slasher, is the yin to J. Daniels Yang. I really believe this. So, what this book does, and I'm not going to talk a lot about what happens in it, but I am going to tell you it is a set piece in the late 1980s in West Texas, in the town that Stephen grew up in. It is about his life at that time, and it's about Tolly and his best friend Amber. Tolly is just a real skinny white dude, and Amber, his best friend, is native, and they are, toward the end of high school. They're not seniors yet. From the start with the title and the fact that he tells you over and over again he killed 15 or so people, depending on who you asked. But it is a set piece of that time. And I grew up at a similar time. I'm a few years younger than Steven, so I really loved the historical
no.
aspect. It felt real to me. What this book does, though, is it sets up the current version, as I think Stephen Graham Jones sees it, of the slasher movie and presents the slasher in a way that frames everything else he writes, and it really does inform the J. Daniels trilogy in ways that make it even better, I think. This book presents Tolly as the slasher the way Stephen would see it, but also, like all Stephen's books, every single detail matters. Like, there is a scene at the beginning of the book at a party. It is a 1980s party. Every single thing that happens in that party matters. The ending, like most of his books, absolutely perfect. Everything, it makes sense, even though it's supernatural, and you're going to cry, and if you don't cry, you are dead inside. um, but it's just every time you think you figured this book out, there's a little bit more, and it is short, right, compared to reading the 1,000 or so pages of the Indian Lake trilogy. And I know as a librarian, I am going to start giving this book out to people to read before they read the entire trilogy if they're not really into slashers or know as much as they think they should. So I am very excited for everyone to get to read this.
So little behind the scenes. Becky offered me this one because she talked about Steven last time, and I had not read it yet. And I was like, she's going to talk about it better than I will, and you would have anyway. In the meantime, I did read it, and I agree with literally everything you said. Emily, have you had a chance to read it or no?
I'm actually about halfway through it. And he's just, I mean, that thing about how everything matters. I mean, admittedly, I haven't finished it, but he writes so tightly and he plots so tightly, but it never, like, he makes it look easy. It doesn't come through in the
Yeah.
actual prose itself, which is like loose and casual and conversational in a way that I really find like, I just get into the rhythm of it and I just go along with it. And I'm happy to go wherever he takes me as a writer. I just think he's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I cry a lot when I'm reading books, but with the end, I'm not going to talk about why at the end this happens, but I can't remember being so overcome, like from reading a story. I cannot remember a time I was more overcome by a story than finishing this one. So get ready. Okay, I'm going to jump onto my first July pick, which is "Stay on the Line" by Clay McLeod Chapman. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, I just did an episode with him talking about it, so there's that reason. But one of the things that I was very excited about when we were talking the first, half of the year was reading shorter stuff, and so this is I think the actual story itself is about 50 pages, so it's a short, quick read, and basically it is a small coastal town is hit by a hurricane, and a lot of the residents of the town are lost in the storm. And so you've got a town that is grieving. And for some reason, one of the few things that is like kind of remaining intact is there's a phone booth, like an old phone booth standing in like the parking lot of this bar that the main character works at. And after this storm, kind of weirdly, people start going into the phone booth and you can see them talking, and it's a phone booth that has been decommissioned for years and shouldn't be working, but for some reason these people are talking. And so it's like, what is going on and how is it connected to this storm that just happened and everything? So pretty heavy grief horror story that's quick and entertaining. I really enjoyed it. And I really like the stuff that Shortwave it's put out by Shortwave, and I really like the stuff that Shortwave is doing. And everybody I've talked to from Shortwave raves about Shortwave, so I just like to put them on people's radar because so far the quality of the stuff that I've been seeing from them is very good too.
They've got a killer slate this year too.
Yeah.
Actually, so did you know this book, The Telephone Booth? Did you know this is based on a real thing?
Oh, I'm going to be mad at Clay for not mentioning that in the conversation we had.
Well, I asked him. Maybe more of a may have been a vaguer influence for him than. But I was like, oh, I know this. So after the 2011 tsunami in Japan and the Fukushima meltdown, there was it's kind of started as I believe it's an art project, but there is a phone booth up on the coast of Japan in that region where people who are grieving people who they lost in the tsunami can go and leave a voicemail in this phone booth for the people they lost. So it's this very moving, sort of, it's in the middle of
Wow.
nowhere. It's not, it was in Japan last year and I was like, oh, can I get there? No, I very much cannot get there. But yeah, I immediately thought of that when I read the description of this book, and I messaged Clay and, what is this, the phone booth? And he's like, yeah, oh my God. So very excited about this one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this story kind of says like, what if someone took advantage of that grief? I think, kind of, I don't know if you guys have read it, but it's a fun, quick little read. So
Not yet.
Well, and right now I'm reading Kill Your Darlings, his
mhm.
short novella that's coming out in the fall with Bad Hand, and I'm reading it
Yeah.
for review right now, and it's also grief horror. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I want to point out, so if you've read What Kind of Mother, this story takes place in the same town and in the same hurricane that is in the What Kind of Mother, but with, I believe, unrelated. It's a totally unrelated thing. It's the same setting. So
that's cool.
yeah, those completists. I got that out of Clay. We talked for 2 hours before we started talking about the story, so I think that's part of why
That sounds
we
about
just
right.
had other stuff to talk about. So, but yeah, definitely that's one I'm looking out for. So, who wants to go next? I will point out ahead of time, not every month we each have two, but for the first few months we each have two to talk about.
So my next one is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. This is out July 9th from Nightfire. This is Chuck's second traditionally published book after last year's Camp Damascus. And this is a Hollywood story. This is we're seeing this sort of wave of horror books that I've really been enjoying. And so this is a screenwriter in Hollywood who is told by the studio that he needs to kill off one of his gay characters, and of course the title is a reference to the like bury your gays trope, the much maligned trope of gay characters not getting to live to see the end of the story, or let alone happily ever after. And he refuses, and all of a sudden strange things start happening, and characters start coming to life and showing up. Huh. Uh, in classic Chuck Tingle fashion, this is it's uplifting in a way. I mean, he's just love is real, right? Like there is that message is always there with him. But there are like some chills here, the way there were with Camp Damascus, and I'm just thrilled that we have him in the horror fiction world now.
I loved
Uh,
this book so much. And again, talking about details too. Like lots of things come back in this book that you think are just one-offs in the way that I saw happen in Camp Damascus as well. Which is as a reader is so satisfying. And you are like cheering and yeah, and there are some scenes in there I will never forget as well. In a good way, not in a like
Oh, of
scarred me for
course.
life way. Well, you never know with horror, right? Right. So,
Sometimes it's both, you know.
yeah, it's true. I'm going to talk about a debut by Danye Coles called Midnight Rooms. I believe it's One World. I should probably double check that and make sure that that's
I
right.
think it's
Oh, no,
Amistad,
sorry, it's not.
actually.
It's Amistad.
Yeah.
It's Amistad. It is a pick. It is on like the Indie Next Best and all that, so that's kind of cool. I read it a few months ago for review in Library Journal. It is not your grandmother's Gothic, so it's really set up with that entire. It's a British Gothic with a half black main character, Orabella. She's like, it's what you expect, right? She's living under the care of her uncle in the 1840s in England. She's been raised as her cousin's companion. But now that her cousin is married, her uncle is very eager to marry her off, right? But she's an orphan. She's half black. Who's going to buy her? Like, who's going to buy her? Who's going to marry her? Which involves basically a business transaction. So she does find a man named Elias Blakersby to whisk her off into the country. Of course, she's separated from everyone and everything she knows. And so what we have is a classic Gothic with very serious Jane Eyre vibes. It's told with a deep reverence for the genre, but it's also brand new. So you get that writing style and common tropes that you're going to expect. There's the decaying house, the odd family gatherings, this idea of like the house, is it shifting? Is it changing? Why can't I find my way? Everyone has to help me. The family, there is this allusion to the fact that there is this bloodline that she may help cure, which has this curse that the family has. So there's that. But it's also very modern. One of the things I really like about this book is the sex scenes are sensual, but there is like consent. She is enjoying herself in ways and like discussing their like actual consent, which you didn't get in the 1840s, which I really liked. It has a gorgeous cover that I don't think that anybody's going to be able to look away from. And it's very similar to the people who like Mexican Gothic would really very much like this. It's the same idea. Very well done for a debut. And the twist and the secrets and the what the supernatural element is very original and will keep people reading. It has just enough of the old and plenty of the new, which I really liked.
I'm really excited about this one. I haven't gotten a chance to pick it up yet, but I've been like eyeing it because Danye has been around in like the indie horror world for some years now, and I'm like, yes, let's get it. Let's get the debut novel out.
Yeah, no, and it's and she's an artist as well, and so the cover is absolutely gorgeous. Which I'm not surprised that she made sure the cover looked great. I just don't know how people are going to be able to walk away from this one. It just screams out to you. Oh, and there is some really cool wallpaper in this book. That's all I'm going to say.
Strengthening the Mexican Gothic connection.
I was going to say,
and mushrooms. There is mushrooms too.
Oh, yeah.
There are mushrooms.
There you go. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought about when you said wallpaper was Mexican Gothic. So
yeah.
The next one I'm going to talk about, I'll set this up. There's going to be a few where I have not read them, and I'm just going to read the description on like Amazon or whatever, just because I haven't read them, so I don't know how to just talk about it. But the next one I want to talk about is Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning, and one of my motivations for this being on my list is I didn't get to read. I think his other book is Burn the Negative. Which sounded great, and I'd heard him talk about it on podcasts and everything, which then put him on my radar. But I read so slow that I don't get to read as many books as I should. Anyway, so but also Heads Will Roll is like a camp setting. So there's always like a camp setting for horror books and everything. So I'll just read this really quick. Willow's worst nightmare was being canceled, but the shadows in the woods of Camp Castaway might destroy more than her reputation. After sitcom star Willow tweets herself into infamy and stumbles blind drunk into a swimming pool, her agent ships her off to Camp Castaway. Nestled deep in upstate New York, Castaway is a summer camp for adults who are desperate to leave their mistakes behind. No real names, no phones, no way to call for help. Willow's fellow campers seem okay. Her own favorite actress is even there making s'mores. And did that jaded writer Danny just wink at her? But the peaceful vibes are shattered when one of the campers vanishes and Willow finds a mutilated doll in her room with a threatening message rolled up inside its mouth. That's creepy. Terror grips the group. Campers begin to lose their heads, literally, and disturbing past deeds come to light. Is Willow about to get canceled all over again? This time for good? So I like the premise. I like kind of a whodunit kind of feel that I'm getting, the vibe that I'm getting off of that. And it sounds good. And I just want to, I've heard good things about Josh. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to dive into this is like, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this podcast was pushing myself to learn, to experience new authors as often as possible. And so I'm leaning into that with some of the things that I have on my list.
So I have two real stunning books for August that I'm going to talk about. The first of which is A Mask of Flies by Matthew Lyons. This is August 6th, Nightfire. This is Matt's third book. His second book was A Black and Endless Sky, which I loved, of 2 years ago. And this continues in that vein of sort of crime horror. But this book reads like an action movie. I mean, it starts in the middle of a bank robbery and it does not back off on the speed till 400 pages later at the end. It is a barn burner. It's the plot is there is a bank robbery by a crew and it goes horribly wrong right off the bat. And the main character, who's I'm terrible with character names. I think her name is Annie.
I think you're right.
Becky, do you?
I'll look it up.
Okay. Let's go with Annie. Annie ends up on the run in a car with her extremely wounded partner and a cop hostage in the trunk. And she has nowhere to go. She knows that someone has tipped off the cops. She's on the run. She is at a loss. And the only place she can think of to go is the cabin she grew up in the remote mountainous valley in the southern part of Colorado. And she hasn't been back there since the night her mother died when she was young, when something chased them, something that was not human. And she gets back to the cabin. Her partner tragically dies and they bury him out in the woods. And then there's a knock at the door and something has come back and it is wearing his skin. And from there, it spins out into cults, cosmic horror, just some truly gnarly body horror. I mean, I there was a scene in this that made me okay, I gotta go run some cold water over my hands. This is rough. But I loved it. And when I started it, I just couldn't put it down. It is so engaging. And there's also in the middle of it, there's this very sweet sort of burgeoning queer love story, and also just a really great tabby cat who's kind of along for the ride unwillingly, but it is a delightful book.
Is the best.
The cat is so good.
And her name is Anne in the book, and Emily, you did a great job. I reviewed this already too. The cover's also stunning. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to warn all of you, everyone listening, Mask of Flies is for a reason. If you see a couple flies together, after reading this, you might run away and hide. Yes. I'm just gonna warn you.
It is a treasure. It is so much fun.
To speak about stunning books, I think my favorite book of this entire section of the year, the second half of the year, is the book I'm going to talk about next. Although, to be fair, I've read only about 75% of the books that we're going to talk about. But it's House of Bone and Rain by Gabino Iglesias, and it's coming out on August 6th from Mulholland Books. And as much as all of us love The Devil Takes You Home, this is
Mhm.
better. This is a novel about friendship. It's a novel about the place, which is Puerto Rico. It's a novel about a place during a hurricane. It's Hurricane Maria. So you already know when you start that things are not going to go well. One of the coolest things about this book is that the beginning of each chapter starts with like what I'm calling a free verse poem, and
I was
they're
going to
just
say
like
it's almost
single
like
line.
found poetry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a free verse poem is what I called it in my review. It's like a haiku but doesn't follow it, and it's just one line, a poetic line in a row, like maybe five or six, that is literally what's going to happen in the chapter, but you like read to find out. So what I love about this is it's full of character development and place, and it's immersive and all of this, but it keeps going because it's not bogged down pacing wise, because you know the hurricane's coming. You know it's going to be bad. You know that what's going to happen in each chapter. But let me give you a little bit about what's happening. So one of the other things, the main character Gabe really has 90% of the narration in this book. And he says one thing over and over again in both English and Spanish: all stories are ghost stories. And I think that is like the book in a nutshell. So it is definitely a horror thriller hybrid. It's way more supernatural than the last one, still gritty and beautiful language juxtaposed together. It opens, as I said, the 2017 Hurricane Maria is about to hit. Bimbo, it's a group of friends. Gabe, the narrator, Xavier, Tavo, Paul, and Bimbo. And Bimbo is his mom is killed. And that's what starts this revenge story. These friends are ride or die together always, and they're going to avenge her death. What I love about this group of characters is they are as diverse as all of the people who live on Puerto Rico. So one of them is white, more white skinned. One of them doesn't even speak Spanish, right? One is darker. There are also some very important Dominican Republic characters from the Dominican Republic, which plays a large part in the story, but also in the way life is in Puerto Rico currently. And it's honest and conflicted. Gabe carries that. It is even about like loving your place, loving your situation. Obviously, he's not perfect. They are out to try to avenge Bimbo's mother's death, and she was killed by drug lords. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. The last thing I want to say about it, besides the language and the intricate plot, is that there is a major plot development in the story that makes total sense in the story, but it also puts this book in the Lovecraftian canon, which I love. I love books that um, use Lovecraft, and especially by people Lovecraft would have hated.
Yeah.
And I like to say they're giving it the middle finger, but also a hug at the same time to Lovecraft. And this book does that. And if you knew anything about Gabino, he talks about he learned English by reading things like Lovecraft. So it's very important to him. But this story is stunning in every way. And I just think as many people that, found The Devil Takes You Home after it won awards, especially, this is going to be huge.
Yeah, the sense of place in this one is like the thing that for me elevates it even farther than The Devil Takes You Home, because you feel like you are in old San Juan, you are in these sort of like grimy, well loved but like neglected by the US government, like, streets and townships. And there's this lovely tension between Gabe and his girlfriend in the book, and she's studying. She wants to go, move to the US, get out of Puerto Rico, go get a job. She's like, we don't have to live like this. We don't have to live in a place where, it takes months to recover from any storm. And Gabe, he loves her and he wants to be with her, but he's like, yeah, but this is my home. And so there's that really lovely tension that is just sort of a through line through the book. Really great work. He's just getting better and better with every book.
Gabino is a pretty cool guy on top of it too.
Yes, indeed.
One of the things that I'm going to say this really quick, because I noticed that Devil Takes You Home often gets shelved in like the mystery thriller section as opposed to horror. Um, do you think that's going to be kind of similar with this, or with this? Do you think this is
Sure.
falls more kind of closely to horror?
So clearly there was a horror, frame in when you read The Devil Takes You Home to the End. But yes, so Mulholland is a crime
Yeah,
thriller uh, imprint. Often, and Emily knows this very well, you can't get over your imprint, right?
yeah,
You're sort of stuck at times. But this one, I don't know how you cannot shelve it in horror, except that Mulholland gets shelved in thriller. It is a definite hybrid. It has both. I mean, it is that crime caper, you know, story that is a classic thriller,
Right.
a la like
Barrio
an
noir is what he calls it.
yeah, he
yeah.
calls it barrio noir. So, but the supernatural in this one is clear. Like it's not
I think it's
implied.
more
It's not.
pronounced.
Yes,
Gotcha. Yeah, that's
but
the
who knows what they'll do? I don't
yeah.
know.
Depends on
That's
the
the feeling
store,
I got from
depends
the
on
way
the
you described
bookseller.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, all right, so I'm going to do my first one of August, and it is Letters to the Purple Satin Killer by Joshua Chaplinsky. That's the one I used the form for, and it's
Yes.
up on the shelf over here. And then that's out from Clash. I think it's on the 6th of August. So this book is essentially, I read it, and I'm about to post an episode talking to Josh about it. Once I navigate through so much technical issues and there's multiple recordings I have to cut, it's going to be a pain. But talked to Josh, and it was a really great conversation. The book is essentially, it's an epistolary novel, and it's a collection of, pretty much just like the title says, there's this famous killer called the Purple Satin Killer, and someone in this universe that this person killed in decided to collect together a bunch of letters that were sent to the killer. So you never hear from the killer himself. It's all letters from people corresponding to the killer. And so it's really interesting from that perspective, because you never interact with the killer. You hear of him secondhand and stuff like that. But it's kind of the gamut of weird admirers, obsessed fans, victim families, like surviving families of victims, police officers. So it's just a cross section of people who would correspond with this notoriously terrible person. And it's run chronologically between like trial, conviction, and then so it runs chronologically through the events of after he was captured and charged with a bunch of killing. So I think that the thing I liked about it was it's kind of an interesting lens into our obsession with true crime and with criminals, and really just kind of a psychological look at like, why do we care so much about this? And I one of the things I liked is that some of the people had interactions with this killer well earlier in their lives, and then they find out how bad this person is, and so they're thinking, oh, this part of my life that was totally innocent suddenly is completely different in my mind. So it's just cool to see the interplay of all the characters in the book, and how they're impacted or inspired by this terrible person. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, this one sounds great. I like that concept of like portrait of a character by describing everything around them,
Yeah, it's like a silhouette in negative space almost. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yep,
And that makes for a fun reading experience to make it a little bit different too, right? So
yeah, yeah. It gives you the opportunity to see the people that glorify awful stuff, but also the people who are devastated by stuff, and some really twisted kind of stuff in between. So yeah, it's a great book. I really recommend it.
All right. Well, my next August pick is The Unmothers by Leslie J. Anderson. This is also August 6th from Quirk. This is a debut novel. Leslie is a poet, and you can tell when you dive into this book. I mean, the prose is just like crystalline comes to mind. It's the story of a journalist who is grieving a terrible personal loss, and her editor, sort of as a a way to, keep her occupied but not give her anything like too difficult, sends her to chase sort of a tabloid human interest story, basically, which is this rural town where there's a rumor that a horse gave birth to a human baby. And so she goes out to this town, sort of resentfully, expecting nothing to come of this. And she's drawn into this community. And oh, hello. Sorry.
Hello, kitty cat.
If I don't pick him up, he will like cry and cry, is the thing. This is Ziggy. All right.
Hi, Ziggy.
So she's drawn into this community, and this is not an economically thriving town. But the one thing they do have is they are excellent horse breeders and trainers. And she discovers that kind of the whole town is under the thumb of this businessman who also happens to control a lot of the drug trade in and out of town. And this is like peak, rural American, like opioid crisis. And what she uncovers is that the women of this town have a secret for when they are pregnant and they don't want to be. And it is a magnificent little book. It's one of those books where I'm like, I can't believe this is your first novel. I'm actively angry at you for how good it is. Like, how dare you? I think it's wonderful. It's this great exploration of like what people do when they have no options. And the thing in the woods is like peak folk horror too. Oh, it's very, very creepy, very effective.
I'm excited about this one. I have a copy of it. I'm very excited about it.
Great cover too, with the hand holding the bloody horseshoe. So good.
Horseshoe. It is very cool. I'm going to take a book that surprised me that I read that's coming out at the end of August. And it's called Sacrificial Animals. And it's by Kaylee Pedersen, I believe. And right off the bat, we are told that the author in the bio or in the information about the book, it's inspired by the author's own journey being adopted from China in 1996 and growing up in a farm in Nebraska. So I think that you need to know, and they do put it on the book because the book is very interesting. So first thing I want to say about this book is this book surprised me, and it is because, and I made sure to include it. It's very good. I made sure to include it because it has a completely different pacing than most of the books we're talking about. It has what I'm calling a contemplative pacing, but it has constant unease. So our main character is a young man named Nick. He is 43 and living in New York City, and he's working as a literary critic. And it's a very far cry from his childhood spent in the shadow of a very cruel father on a 1,000-acre family farm in Nebraska. So his father reaches out to Nick to let him know he's dying. Nick has an older brother named Joshua who is estranged, and Joshua was disowned when he decided to marry Amelia, who's a woman of Chinese descent, and the father is extremely racist. So Nick encourages his estranged brother and Amelia, who he has stayed in contact with both of them. So over time, so it's told they're going to go back. Okay, it's told exclusively though from Nick's point of view in two time frames. There's a then, the year he was 13, when he was forced to kill newborn fox pups, and there is a fox on the cover, and it becomes important. And then now, as Nick, Joshua, and Amelia return. So it is a supernatural horror tale. It centers family, trauma, and revenge, and unease is in every detail. So you'll fall into the rhythm, even though it's like a slow burn. It's not. I don't like to use slow burn because you fall into this rhythm as a reader of these alternating short chapters, right? 13:43, 13:43. And so you just keep wanting to read to find out what's going on as the stories come together when Nick goes back to the house. And it balances really masterfully, and I believe it's a debut, character and atmosphere, and readers will follow Nick with the foreboding details. But here's the thing, okay? The tension is purposely built, and really not much is happening until the last 50 pages. And oh my Lord, you have to read the last 50 pages. Everything comes to matter. It is awesome. So I say that with, readers might be like, there's not much happening here while I'm reading it, but I'm totally drawn in. And it's all building on purpose. and I really thought it was masterfully done and really, really fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I haven't. I'm always like my curiosity is always piqued when I see, especially a debut horror novel by an author I've never heard of, particularly when it's from a publisher or an imprint that doesn't primarily do horror. I think this one is what, St. Martin's.
It's just St. Martin's. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
And they
regular
definitely
St.
do horror,
Martin's.
but they publish so much that, I'm like, all right, I'm paying attention. I want to know what this is all about. So I'm excited for this one.
Awesome. I'm going to finish up August with Dear Hannah by Zoya Stage. So Zoya Stage, I have been a champion of her work for as long as I've known of her, which I read Baby Teeth back in 2018. And I in my mind, I categorize this as a probably an oft hoped for, but I don't think anybody really knew whether it was going to happen or not, sequel to Baby Teeth. Um, but I think, Becky, it was you that I saw recently from like when you were talking about it, saying that you could read them in either order. Am I right on that?
Yep.
I'm 40 pages in right now, so I only recently started reading it. But so Baby Teeth by Zoya Sage is a fantastic book, and everybody should read that. Um, this book, so in Baby Teeth, it leaves off Hannah when she was a child, and after the terrible, crazy things that happened in that book, her anyway, I don't even know if I can spoil. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so this book picks up.
Well, you don't need to spoil. You
Yeah.
can't spoil it because the book doesn't really spoil it.
Right.
Like
That's true. That's
they
true. Yeah.
inform each other in different ways.
So one. This book essentially, instead of Hannah being a child, she's now an adult. She's in her early 20s. She's a phlebotomist, and she has kind of manipulated her way into a relationship with an older man who's got a teenage daughter, and so much in the way that the character Hannah in Baby Teeth would try to manipulate situations to her advantage. It seems like we're starting out the book with her doing that again. She sees a life that she wants to have, and she does stuff to make it happen. And from what I understand, as time goes on, things get harder for her to maintain control of. And when that ramps up, then she ramps up and things kind of go wild. Honestly, it could have been like a book called Zoya Makes Fun of Rob for 200 pages, and I would still read it because I really love her writing. But I was always curious what would happen. The book Baby Teeth ends in a way where you're like, what comes next? And so I'm very excited that there is something that comes next. And definitely looking forward to getting through this.
Yeah, she calls it a standalone sequel, and I totally think that that's true, having read it. And it's far enough in the future also, which I appreciate it. I think if we had come and seen Hannah again as only a few years later, you wouldn't get as much out of it. But it's kind of neat. I want to go back and read Baby Teeth now that I've read Dear Hannah, because I think you see different things. I already can remember things. I'm like, oh, I'm remembering that differently now because I've read this. It'll be very popular. There's a lot of fans out there, and it'll bring new fans.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So excited. I've had the arc since she got arcs, and it's just, I have not been able to pick it up. And finally I'm like, I have the time, I can do it. So I just so happily dove into it.
Hey, I want to switch the order and go first for September.
Oh, I bet you do.
Because I want to talk about a book by Emily Hughes, who's on here right now, called Horror for Weenies. And that comes out September 3rd from Quirk. And I'm going to tell you, first of all, it's Horror for Weenies, everything you need to know about the films that you're too scared to watch. And I've told this to Emily. I gave it a star in Library Journal, and I'm very hard on people I know. Also, this is a book that tells you what it's going to be. And the way I like to talk about it is the book itself is somehow succinct and thorough. It walks that line between explaining the entire plot of terrifying movies without scaring the reader. And I literally have one on pre-order for my Horror for Weenie sister-in-law to arrive on her doorstep. It still keeps it conversational, even though Emily's clearly an expert here. But really the brilliance of this book is in the writing. How to explain why these books are terrifying, important, influential, and an obsession of millions of viewers without scaring the reader who cannot watch them. And I promise you, you will be fine. So, first of all, not every movie's here. The book is a good length. It is not overdone. The key is influential films from three eras, the 60s and 70s, then the 80s, and 90s, and then the 2000s and 2010s. So those are three, paired decades. Also, there's no fear rating system, which I appreciate and understand because what scares people is very personal. So basically for each entry, which is the meat of the book, it follows a similar pattern. And there's 25 films. So the basic idea, which is a one-sentence summary, you might actually want to watch it but you should definitely not watch, right? Avoid if. So those are two different areas. And then here's exactly what happens. Okay. It actually says, okay, here's exactly what happens. And it's a detailed multi-page summary of what happens, but without the jump scares and gore. It's told with distance, but still it's conversational. And it makes it seem not scary at all. And I like to say, start with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you'll see. But this is the parts that are great. Say this at a party, and they're in dialogue bubbles, which I love. Iconic moments, which you need to know, so you don't have to watch. And then can't watch it, read these instead. Also, there's more in there, too. I like the little asides about tropes, lists of interests, such as spoiling other movies with a single line. That's one of my favorite parts of the book. There's like a page that spoils a whole bunch of other movies for you. Discussions of like what zombies actually are called in zombie movies. That was a fun one. And then there is an essay framing each major era, too, in case you can't go that far. And one of my favorites asides is a taxonomy of a jump scare, the bane of weenies everywhere. So I really like this. Also of note, which I didn't know when I started this is part of a new series by Quirk that's going to be Outsiders Guides to different like pop culture things. So I thought that was kind of neat. So anyway, I really like this book and think it's going to be one of the best books of this season.
Thank you so much, Becky. I literally want the ground to just like open up and swallow me whole anytime I have to listen to anyone say anything nice to me about this book. So I'm going to have to get over that between now and September. That is so kind of you and so meaningful to me. And I had a blast writing this book, and I just really hope people like it. It is for weenies, as the title says, but I really think that there's something in there for even like diehard horror fans who maybe haven't had these movies, contextualized in this way before, or people who want to get, more in depth, but don't necessarily want to, read a whole book about The Exorcist, right? Because they could certainly take their pick there. And, I had the opportunity to write a lot of really goofy jokes in the process.
They were great jokes.
The dream.
But I do want to say, going to your point about it being for people who really like horror, I actually think that this book is good for people who really like horror to help them talk to people who don't as well, right? So like if you're at a cocktail party and, something comes up about The Exorcist, many of us can go on a long rampage about, and a long rambling thing. And this actually can help those of us who are huge fans rein it in for the regular people too.
Oh, that's
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah, I mean, my wonderful, wonderful editor, Jess Zimmerman, is herself a weenie and would happily tell you that. I'm not, outing her here. And basically wanted this book written so that she could read it. And, since she read it, she's like, I get to have conversations with my husband about The Thing and Poltergeist and all these movies that are foundational to him that I've never been able to watch. So for mixed scare tolerance relationships, I really think this can be therapeutic.
Marriage counseling. Anyway, you can go now, Emily.
That's so exciting.
Go back to you, baby.
Thank you. All right. So my first book for September is Sinaphasia, A Celebration of Chinese Horror. This is edited and translated by Ting Ni. I was on a panel with Shui Ting last year, and she was talking about this book, and she's done this for sci-fi fantasy before, which is she's picked a bunch of uh, not yet translated into English sci-fi fantasy stories from Chinese authors and translated and curated them for an English-speaking American audience. And obviously Chinese sci-fi is like a hugely popular even among English-speaking audiences now. I mean, just look at the Three Body Problem. uh but there hasn't been a lot of Chinese horror that has made it over to English speaking audiences. So I'm really, really excited for this one. I love any horror anthology that is going to give me a lens into how another culture tells scary stories. Um, and this one in particular has me excited because I know none of these authors, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
I love going into an anthology with no preconceived notions. I have no idea what I'm getting into. I am here for the ride, baby. And yeah, this one is really exciting to me.
I'm excited about this one too. I profiled it in my preview article. I'm really excited to see this coming out.
The Devil by Name by Keith Rawson, which is the follow-up to Fever House, which came out last fall, I think, last fall. So Fever House was bananas crazy book. I don't know. Did you either of you read that book?
So I didn't read it. It's been sitting on my to read shelf, taunting me for months.
Yeah. It's one of those. So honestly, Fever House dragged me in by the cover alone because it's like a severed hand throwing up the horns and it's got like pointy, it just looked real hardcore and cool. And I was like, this looks cool. What's this about? And it's such a hard book to talk about because there's so many different things going on. But I was excited about Fever House. I read Fever House. It is crazy. It's got demonically possessed severed hands and clandestine government agencies and suddenly zombies and like this like criminal element and a famous rock band. There's just so much stuff going on, but it all just makes such a good story. And I loved that book. I thought it was just such a riot. It was like one of those. It was a quick, fast, adrenaline filled kind of ride, and there was so much crazy stuff going on. You're like, what? Where did this come from? And it was unrelenting as far as like the horror aspects of it, the gore and the violence and things. And so that's Fever House. That's not the book I'm talking about. The Devil by Name. There's a lot of words devil on our list, so I just take the wrong one.
There are a lot of devils.
The devil takes you home by name. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Kills devils, which is coming up too.
Yeah. Devil by Name picks up 5 years after Fever House left off, and basically now the world is overrun with crazy, super violent zombies, and so a lot of the entities from the original book are working toward solving this kind of world is overrun by this horrible zombie thing situation and introducing new characters and stuff like that. I mean, honestly, I'm just going off of the momentum of the first book. I really want to see what is he going to do to carry this story on. And like, he definitely ups the stakes by turning it into basically a zombie apocalypse. So the first book was incredibly entertaining and interesting and fast paced and just insane. And so, yeah, definitely excited to see where he goes. And for anybody who follows Stephen King, you've probably heard a lot about Fever House recently because he has been tweeting. He tweeted multiple times about the book while reading it, which I don't think I've seen Stephen King do. Like, I've seen him tweet about a book and be like, hey, this was good. I've never seen him go, this book is this. And then later on, oh, this book is also, and continue the conversation. So if that's an endorsement for people, Stephen King really enjoyed it too. So the original, not the sequel.
We have a new cat friend with Emily.
Yes, this is Sativa.
I didn't know we were supposed to have display cats. I could have borrowed a cat.
I don't have any cats, so Okay.
So my next one for September is This World Is Not Yours by Kemi Ashengiwa. This is September 10th. This is Nightfire. This is a novella. I have not read this yet, but I'm very excited about it because particularly because I love space horror. I love sci-fi horror. I love, a weird planet that wants to kill you. That is catnip to me, and this one is all that plus I think the marketing copy calls it like a toxic polycule on a sentient planet. So this is like interesting relationship dynamics and a world that wants you dead, and I'm very much here for it. Especially since last year Nightfire had another great sci-fi horror novella, The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. And I'm very into this like sort of mini, it's not officially a series, of course, but like I'm very into this mini trend. Killer cover on
That's
this
cool.
one too. It's like an evilly grinning too many teeth smile through a space helmet. It's great.
Ooh,
Love it.
love it.
Um, I am going to talk about a book probably everybody's already aware of, but I want to make sure I mention it. It's Rachel Harrison's latest. It's called So Thirsty, and it's coming out on by Berkeley on September 10th. So, what I want to say first is Rachel Harrison has a way of telling the stories of authentic. I don't like that people call it feminist horror because I don't think it's feminist. I think it's authentically telling stories of women, in that age, in that late 20s, early 30s, from a place of authenticity, which is about, and like all of her books, it delves into all the horrors of being a woman in America. It delves into relationships. This time we have best friends, but in the past we've done sisters and family, and there's always body horror in some way because there's a lot of body horror to being a woman. And this is her vampire story. And I want to also state that like there's a lot of vampire stories that have been coming out in the last year and are going to keep coming out. But a lot of them, and I think like Nat Cassidy's Nestling started this, takes the idea of the vampires and changes it a little bit, right? Adds a unique twist. And I'll talk about another one coming up in a little bit as well that does the same thing. Um, and makes them fresh and new, which I have been loving, right? We've had enough of the same story over and over again. So, specifically in this one, we have a young woman. Her name is, I'm trying to refresh my memory, Sloane. Yeah, Sloane. She doesn't want her birthday to come. It's a lot of women. So,
Relatable.
she doesn't like, what?
Relatable.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm about to have like the end of a decade birthday next week, and I'm like, oh. So anyway, her husband is like, well, I am going to give you a birthday getaway, but instead of with me, you're going to go with your best friend. Her best friend is very different from her. Her best friend Naomi is sort of a little wilder, and has lived her life in a different way than Sloane has, but they are still best friends. So she is looking to have this weekend with wine tastings and cozy robes, and not thinking about the fact that her husband cheats on her all the time. Okay. So already we've got like unease and all this. But Naomi has a totally different type of, party in mind and wants them to have a wild night. Well, I told you it's a vampire tale. So it does take a horrifying turn when they have their wild night. But then, obviously the vampire parts come in, and it brings up issues of immortality, eternal youth, like what happened, all these different things that women might think they want, but when you have it in a different way. And I don't like to use the word feminist horror because I feel like it's about authentically. There's nothing. Women are allowed to talk about themselves and what it means to be authentically a woman without it being without it being a thing. There's not manonist or whatever when men told their stories. So I just think if you like Rachel Harrison, you will love this. If you haven't read Rachel Harrison yet, this is also a great place to start. All of her books, they are not, some people call them like, say they're like, oh, they're good for people who don't like horror. No, her books have horror. There's scary things.
Right.
There's body horror. The covers are cute, but the books are not in a good way. So I just, I'm going to make sure people know that. But this would be a great place to start, as any of them are. But so thirsty.
Yeah,
Great cover.
I haven't read this one yet, which I am personally shaming myself for. But Rachel is a treasure. I have read everything else she's
Yes.
written. Everything she has written that I have read in less than 24 hours. She has that gift of writing incredibly readable prose that doesn't sacrifice, artfulness or beauty or interest or like thorniness. She's got that. It really is a gift because it's so hard to do. And I just love everything she writes. And I mean, sure, like feminist horror, yeah. If like your definition of feminist is it involves women, right, or it
Yes.
is about women, it's like, oh, okay, I guess. But I mean, the thing that I have always loved about her fiction is how well she embodies the weird anxieties, particularly of being a woman in your 30s right now. I mean, The Return, that was the thing that really grabbed me about The Return. Her first book was like, oh, I've never seen this part of my experience on the page before. And she had me from jump, and I will go with her wherever she takes me.
I've read Such Sharp Teeth because I was like, I gotta get some werewolves in my life because I'm always happy to read some werewolves. And that was such an easy, fun, great book that when Black Sheep came out, I was like, duh, of course, and I read it right away. Everything you said about how quickly you consume the books and the quality of them and everything. Yeah, she's an automatic read. I have an arc of So Thirsty, but I haven't got a chance to read it yet.
She
So
is sneaky though, because you read them fast, you think they're easy, and then you can't stop thinking about
yeah,
them, which
Mm-hmm.
I love.
yep, totally agree. I totally agree. All right, so this next one is another bunch of the word kill devils by Johnny Compton. This is another author where I didn't get to read Spite House. It didn't get to work into my list yet, but I've heard so much good stuff about it, and now that there's a new book coming out, obviously I want to, and pause because it just made it sound like I missed the train on Spite House. Books don't have an expiration date. You can read them whenever you want to, um, which is something that I hear people saying more, and people should just say it and say it. I'm just saying now I'm like, this gives me an opportunity to kind of like hook into another new thing. I've heard lots of ravings about Spite House, so that's why it's on my radar. But I haven't read it, so I'm going to just read the thing really quick. And actually, a comp to a different Sylvia Moreno Garcia book, Certain Dark Things, is listed here. So, when all hell breaks loose, you need a devil on your side. Sarita has been watched over by a guardian angel her entire life. She calls him Angelo and keeps him a secret, but secrets can't stay buried forever. When Angelo murders someone she loves, Sarita begins to see what's really lurking in the shadows surrounding her, and she'll have to embrace the evil within if she hopes to make it out alive. So that sounds pretty. That's. I think it's a good setup for some stuff. Like, you think that like you've got this like benevolent protective force around you, and really it's not as benevolent as maybe you thought. But yeah, definitely want to get into reading Johnny Compton because I've just heard so much good stuff.
I will tell you, I've read this one, and I love that the plot summary does not contain any spoilers.
Yeah.
I mean, the book
That's
opens
far
with
too rare.
it is, and I've read it now, and I can tell you because this book is epic in scope, even though
Mm-hmm.
it's not epic in length. I actually recommend it to your Sookie Stackhouse fans who are good with more
Mm.
violence and don't need the romance. Sarita is that strong person, sort of caught up in a web much larger than herself, and there's a lot. Again, the what's going on behind the scenes is epic in scope without the book being bogged down and still having enough. So I really, it was a fun read.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Johnny is great. He's a great guy.
I do notice that we all picked people that are like good humans, you know. So.
I'm not surprised.
That would be a weird part of the conversation. This book is great, but that person is real garbage.
I wouldn't pick it. I mean, some of the people I don't know, but but yeah, no, I'm not talking about a book by a douche. Sorry.
Same.
Oh my gosh, we're already to October, aren't
October,
we?
yeah.
And Emily, I know the book you're going to talk about is like next on my to read.
Oh, but which one am I going to talk about first, Becky?
I don't know. Whichever one is first is the one that's next on my to read.
The one that's first on the list that I printed out for myself, which is The Bog Wife by Kay
Yes, that's
Conister.
the one.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is out October 1st from Counterpoint. This is it's like this is a horror novel, but it is very gentle. It's gothic, it's atmospheric, it's got this sort of this family that has sort of calcified around its own belief system, out in the middle of nowhere in, I think it's West Virginia, in this crumbling house at the edge of a bog. And they are stewards of the bog. And the eldest son, when he comes of age and takes over the family, will be given a wife by the bog. And the exact sort of process of this, I will leave you to discover for yourselves when you read it. But it is fascinating, and it is so lush and green and like so like it you can like the book has roots in the nature, like you know what this bog looks like and feels like and smells like. um and you know what this family, so the patriarch has died. The one sister who left, who was like, I can't do this, and got out of Dodge, has come back because her father is dying. And without him, they find themselves kind of at a loss. They're rudderless, I guess is the word. Um, and there's like a little bit of a climate element here. There's a little bit of eco horror, but it is, again, it's really this just like beautiful and atmospheric and eerie story. Um, Kay Chronister is, I read, did I read Thin Places, which was, I think, her first collection. And then she released a novel with another publisher a couple years ago. But I am so in the bag for her right now. This book was everything I wanted. It was just this perfect sort of humid read. And I can't wait to hear what you think about it, Becky.
It's literally next up. My review is due on the 9th.
Nice. It's also a fast read. It didn't take me very long. It is very compelling. I was just flipping pages.
I love hearing that.
You talked about how it was, atmospheric. I have a book that is the opposite. It is totally in your face. I just finished reading it. It's All the Hearts You Eat by Haley Piper. First of all, I need to say about this book is chunky, okay? But it is an epic story. I feel like it has 5 acts, and I feel like it reads like an epic opera and like a
Wow.
Wagner opera. And I mean that in the fullest sense. Like, you know how those, if you know about like the Ring Cycle, it gets kind of like just totally bananas at points. But here's the thing, the pacing of each of those acts is like its own story arc as well. And it all builds on top of each other. So here's what happens. We have the main character. Oh, also, I need to say this before I start. All the characters, the main characters that carry the story with the narration are trans. So know that now, but I'm not going to say, like, when I say, she, that is the person's true identity. Okay. So the main character is Ivory, and she is a young woman. She's the adult. The other narrators in the story are teens. And the basically Ivory lives in this small coastal town in Massachusetts. It's a vacation town. It's clear that Ivory has sort of traveled a lot to find her home, and she's not necessarily going to stay here. But she lives in this town. She's a waitress. She rents rooms from these older women who are out of town, and she goes out to the beach in the mornings to swim and finds down the beach there's a dead girl who's washed up. And Cabrina is one of the narrators through her diaries. She washes up on shore, and Ivory finds what appears to be a death poem. And anyway, what it starts is this story with Ivory, and then Cabrina, whose mother is the local politician who is very upset and refuses to let Cabrina be Cabrina. She wants Cabrina to stay the son she had and like has locked Cabrina up. So there's question of whether or not Cabrina killed herself. But her two best friends, Rex, he and Z, XI, also Alyssa is another name. They know Cabrina did not kill herself. And they are this great found family. So it sounds like it's going to be this story. So when Ivory finds this note, she then gets these ghosts start visiting her. And the ghosts, there's a ghost that could be Cabrina, maybe not, sucks her into this other world. And I need to say, I can't really tell you what happens more than that because the plot goes like this, and each act, like I said, has its own arc, and it gets more and more. Bananas isn't the right word because it's very true. And it's very like you follow it and you believe it's all happening, but there are portals open to another world, as Haley is wont to do with, cosmic horror. It is the most, and Haley does this every time, but it is the most realistic depiction I have read as someone who is cis of the trans experience without it being like, this is what it's like to be trans. And hey, we're
Yeah.
trans. That is just, they just are. And you can just feel, and four different perspectives of what it is with different family situations. And like I said, it goes in these arcs. There are, those of you who read Queen of Teeth, there's a lot of Queen of Teeth in here too. There's cosmic horror, there's body horror, there's an apocalypse that may or not be coming. I just trust me. Like, read this. You get to the end and you're like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. So, all the hearts you eat. It is also in the whole vampire trope as well. But again, they're not vampires like you think of them. They are, but they're different.
Have not read this one yet, but she does not miss.
No.
Good Dogs by Brian Asman. Going back to talking about werewolves, like I mentioned earlier, I haven't read this. I don't know if either of you have, but I have not read this yet. Brian is another person who is on my radar as an author who I want to get into based on hearing him talk and hearing, reviews of other stuff. And so I'm going to kind of summarize really quickly. But basically, it's, about basically werewolves, and there's like essentially like a group of people who are werewolves who find a way to kind of regulate the time when they change. So they're kind of like found family, and they find a system where they can kind of be in control of them, that time of, the month when they turn into werewolves and everything. So they're not out of control. They're not, they find a way to do it in a way where they can live normal lives in society, basically, is what it seems like, until something goes wrong, and like a severed leg is found in their backyard, and they have to go on the run. And then, obviously the careful kind of thing that they've put together is gone, and they have to kind of try and survive is the general idea I got from reading this synopsis. And it says, a heartfelt and harrowing story of survival, belonging, found family, and the lengths will go to protect it. So I feel like, kind of like many of the monster kind of tropes in horror, there's a lot you can do with werewolves. There's a lot you can do. I mean, just look at what has been done. Mongrels just kind of blew my mind with how he went, like what he did with what it means to be a werewolf, the impact of that. And so I like this found family aspect. I like the idea of what I'm hearing. So, and the book cover is phenomenal. Like, it's just such a good book cover. So that always drags me in too. But any chance I get, I'm reading werewolf stuff, and this sounds like it's got like a really good kind of heartfelt story to it. So,
I mean, there are people who, when I talk about helping readers, there are people that read authors, there are people that read tropes,
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. And werewolves are just a good platform for exploring themes of things that happen to people or people experience. So
True.
People transform. What can you do?
they do. Yeah.
Ooh, Emily's got a book that she told me all about when I just saw her, and I'm excited to hear her explain it to everyone else.
I love this book. So I loved Maeve Fly by CJ Lead, came out last year. It was her debut novel. Female serial killer who by day works as a, definitely not Disney, princess at a theme park.
Mm-hmm.
And it's bloody and kind of nihilistic and like glitzy and glamorous. And I was like, this is a talent. This woman she knows what she's doing. She has a vision and she is sticking to it. And I didn't know how she could possibly outdo herself. But American Rapture is, I mean, I feel like this the way I do about House of Bone and Rain compared to The Devil Takes You Home. It was like, oh, I thought you already wrote your best book, but here you are and you wrote a better one immediately as a follow-up.
Wow.
This is, oh my God, this book. Oh my God. So the setup here is the main character is a very, very, very sheltered teenager. She is 17. She is under the thumb of her strict conservative Catholic parents in Wisconsin, of all places. And she is missing her brother, her twin brother, who was shipped off to an institution after an incident, which we learn more about as the book unfolds. But the other unfolding incident is a plague, is an epidemic of a flu-like disease that causes unimaginable violence, and specifically sexual violence, in the people it infects. And there's an element of this that's similar to Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, in terms of the sort of like feral sexual violence aspect of it. So, just flagging that for anyone who's like, I really don't want to read about that particular subject matter. And her parents both succumb to this, and she finds herself on her own with basically no one to help her except the how-to books. She has, learned various skills from the library, because that's all she's allowed to check out, are instructional books. And she embarks on a road trip to find her brother, and cobbles together this little, found family group of other survivors. And I love a post-apocalyptic road trip story so much. I'm like, yeah, show me all your set pieces. Show me all your interesting zombie fortifications. Show me like the supposedly safe military checkpoint where everything goes horribly wrong. Show me the person we think we can trust who turns out to be, devious. I love all of the tropes of that type of story, and she does not disappoint with any of them here. There is the, handsome secular boy who she meets, who, she kind of starts to fall for. There is the older woman who recognizes that she is, held back by the constraints of the faith that has been kind of imposed on her, and shows her that there's, another way to be. There's the dog that she kind of adopts, who keeps her safe and is this, giant beast of a, sweetheart of a dog. There's a great set piece for anyone who read American Gods. You may remember there's a kind of an extended set piece at House of the Rock, which is it's sort of a weird roadside attraction, part of that sort of, bygone America. They camp out at House of the Rock here, and the sort of a very important scene takes place there, and it's great. I cried through the last yeah. I cried through the last 50 pages of this book. I did not stop crying, but I could not stop reading. Absolutely wrecked me. Also there's this great through line where the main character, this for the whole book, is having her own sort of feelings of sexual awakening that have been, so repressed. And she has this, like, there's this undercurrent of tension of, is this normal? Is this sinful? Or am I sick? Do I have this virus? That lends a really good air of uncertainty to her character arc. It's such a good book. It is not for the faint of heart. It is very gory. It is very, there are a lot of triggers here. So I would say, check warnings before you read it if you're going to pick it up. But I fucking loved it. I think she is brilliant, and I want
Wow.
everybody to read this book.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I was
Um,
pretty blown away by Mayfly. So yeah, um, so
yeah, and
excited about
Mayfly was a debut with so much like
it.
poise, and I mean, yes, it was bloody and all the things you said, but like
Yeah.
it was so well done that it's surprising to see that just come out of someone you didn't read anything about before. So to hear that it's even
Mhm.
better is great.
While you were raving about it so much, I actually went into my NetGalley just to make sure I have an arc of American Rapture, and I do. So
And I was unable to fit it in my schedule, so I passed it on to some other person to have the joy of getting to read it. But I do have an e-arc, yeah.
Yeah, you
Um,
gotta. Ugh.
hmm.
I am going to talk about a book that I put on my list. I haven't read it yet. I'm about to read it. It's Coup de Grace by Sophia. Is it Arjim? Is that how we say?
Ajram, I believe.
Ajram. Okay. And it's coming out. It's a novella, and it's coming out October 1st from Titan. So I put this book on my list for two reasons. Number one, I am a sucker for a liminal spaces story.
Hmm.
I'm gonna just tell everybody. I had to look it up while Emily was talking. There's a
Piranesi.
liminal spaces novel called Traveler's Rest by Keith Lee Morris. It's older. It has terrible reviews on Goodreads, but it is one of my favorite liminal space novels. The liminal space novel where the main character gets trapped and never really gets out, and I'm just a sucker for it because it's a great metaphor for so many things. So the other reason I put this book on my list months ago to ask to be the one to review it was because Daniel Kraus was just like raving about it online
Hmm.
without being asked, without any context. And so little behind the scenes, back in the day when he was an editor at Booklist and I worked with him, he mostly did teen, and I did adult horror reviews, and he was in charge of the teen section of Booklist magazine. He would steal all the good horror books from me, um, like the adult ones when he could. And so it was this like whole thing that like until he left, I got like after Daniel's pick. So when he raves about a book, I know I'm going to like it because we had that relationship for so many years where we were, talking about books behind the scenes. So that being said, it is, getting comparisons to Daniel Lusky's House of Leaves, which I also like. So we have a main character. It's a young man. His name is Vicken, and as with most liminal space novels, something is going on in the main character's life that is going to cause, that they're not in a good place. And in this case, he is probably going to kill himself. And in Montreal, it's very much set in Montreal. And just end it all for good to not have to deal with depression and pain and just a life of not being well. So he gets off the subway to get to his stop to go to throw himself into the river, and he is just stuck in an endless looping stations. Now, anyone who knows Montreal, which I do because I have family in Vermont, there are a lot of underground tunnels and underground passageways, so it's actually very easy to get lost. Anyway, and Toronto's similar as well, but I think Montreal's even more. So he just wants to get out. Right now, he sort of has this will to live and get out and survive, and he's exploring rooms and corridors. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens. And he gets the sense that he probably wasn't trapped there by accident, and he probably isn't alone. So I am super excited to read this. And again, I said I'm a sucker for liminal space novels. They are not everyone's favorite, again, because sometimes they feel like you're just trapped for no reason. I always find a reason. And I think sometimes with these books, the liminal space books, they ask you to find your own reason, which I also really appreciate. So I'm excited to read this one, and I'll be reviewing it in Booklist.
Nice.
Yes, Booklist.
I'm very excited about this one too, because I'm a sucker for House of Leaves. I was a head over heels in love with Piranesi, the
Oh
Susanna
yeah,
Clark book that was
so
Yes,
good.
this is very
Yeah.
similar as well, too.
right,
Yes.
and like Piranesi but make it horror is like
Yes.
custom made for
Yeah.
me. And also as someone who lived in New York City for a long time, the idea of an endless subway station is a particular type of horror that I can relate to very
Yeah.
deeply. Sophia is super cool. They actually made my wedding ring because they're also a really talented jeweler.
Hmm.
Yes. They are a great jeweler. I've seen their work online. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I had no idea at the time when I got married. I was just like, I'm in love with this ring, and like, the world is very small.
Well,
Oh,
that's a different tie to Danielewski as well because they made jewelry tying into House of Leaves as well. I know that for
Oh,
sure.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
yeah. They actually
Yep.
also made a.
Hmm.
They're friends with Cassandra Caw and made a custom necklace for Nothing But Blackened Teeth.
Nice.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have an arc of that too,
I
by the
see
way.
it. I see it. I have one too. It's
I'm going to do
excellent.
my best to get Sophia to come on and talk about it because, yeah. The other comp that people had been mentioning when talking to them about it is the Rorschach text has like some kind of unspace kind of stuff where there's like it's talking about the space between things and stuff. So that was another comp that came up
Yeah.
in
Hell
regards to
yeah.
Again,
this.
though, like I do say, people like if you're not a liminal spaces person, like you might not want to read this, but like I am all about like
Yeah.
that is my jam.
Right. But if you're into the back rooms, boy, do we have a book for you.
Yeah. And I didn't. Oh, there's a trailer out that I haven't had a chance to watch yet, but I heard the trailer for it is really cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the
For
trailer
the
is
book.
cool.
For the book, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump on to my other October is Memorials by Richard Chismar. Another one of those people who he gets pretty solidly categorized in horror, but I think that people who are more leaning toward crime usually can like easily step into this world as well because he writes stuff in a very kind of true crime way, definitely with the Boogeyman books. But this sounds like it's kind of a similar thing. So, three students from a small college embark on a week-long trip. This is in 1983, a week-long trip to film a documentary on roadside memorials for their American Studies class. The project starts out as a fun adventure with long stretches of empty road and nightly campfires where they begin to open up with one another. But this is so creepy. I love this. As they venture deeper into the Appalachian backwoods, the atmosphere begins to darken. They notice more and more of the memorials feature a strange, unsettling symbol hinting at a sinister secret. So, like, can you imagine that? You look at so many memorials, suddenly you start to like recognize things from other ones. Ugh. Paranoia sets in when it appears they're being followed. Their vehicle is tampered with overnight, and some of the locals appear to be anything but welcoming. Before long, the students can't help but wonder if these roadside deaths were really random accidents or if something terrifying is at work here. How awesome does that sound? I heard him
Sounds
talk about this when he was,
awesome.
yeah, he was doing podcasts for Becoming the Boogeyman. And, oh, just like the whole idea. Because, like, that's just something where you, driving down the road, you could have the idea to write this story. Like, what if these are connected? That's all you'd have to think about, and that's the story. So, yeah, I'm very excited
He's
for
been
this
doing
one.
a lot of like meshing real things, like really real. I mean, I
Yeah.
know he used his own story for the last couple books, but I do like that he puts that reality in and uses that as this jumping off point for the fear and the unease.
Yeah. Because, like, that's sometimes the scariest stuff is the
Yep.
stuff that, like, that could be me driving,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere and noticing that. And suddenly I'm the person who's in the horror movie.
Yep.
Which I believe I saw him tweet somewhere that there's going to be a third Boogeyman book too. So I'm excited
Nice.
about that.
Yeah,
But anyway, yeah,
I love the
Memorials.
hook for this one so much. It's got like a real Blair Witch angle to it that
Yeah.
sounds very,
Mhm.
very intriguing to me.
Yep. Yeah. Very
Oh my
excited.
gosh, everybody, we're up to November.
We're up to November. And I will point out that I don't have November books. I do have something to talk about in December.
Yeah.
So November is just going to be the two of you.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah.
And actually,
Well,
both of Emily's books are books I'm going to be reviewing, so I'm excited.
wonderful.
Very nice.
Well, I'm going to flip the order that I was going to do these in to build off what you were saying about memorials, Rob.
Mhm.
Because one of my books for November is an anthology called The Map of Lost Places, edited by Sherry Renee Thomas and Leslie Connor. I don't have a specific date for this one, but it'll be out from Apex in November. This has been on my radar since I saw the open call for stories for it. It is an anthology themed around the idea that, or the theme of the anthology is that these are stories about lost places, whether real or imagined, and that have some kind of, folklore or, some kind of aura around them, places that you maybe don't want to go, or places that are maybe quite literally, off the map. Which is a trope that I love. I love the sort of, all the, I think about, This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer, right? All the locals know that you avoid this stretch of
Mm-hmm.
forest, but these stupid strangers don't, same with Blair Witch Project, right? This is the place the locals all talk about that you really shouldn't go. One of my favorite, all-time favorite horror tropes. So an entire anthology of that. I am in, baby. I am in.
Yeah, that
I,
sounds great.
I actually am been talking to Leslie Connor about it, and they're going to get me a copy, a PDF before the end of July, so I can put it in my October column. I'm really excited about it. Very
Hell yeah.
excited. Um, so my first one is, oh yeah, the Keeper of Keys. The Keeper of the Key, sorry, by Nicole Wilson. It's coming out. It's a smaller press title. It's coming out on November 12th from Parliament House Press, who I have read books from before. But the reason I was excited about this one is because I was on the Stoker Award jury when Nicole Wilson's first novel, Tide Pool, was nominated for Best First Novel. So I really very much liked her writing, and I was excited to see she had another book. So this is a gothic story it's got a great cover, by the way. Sometimes I often really like the smaller presses that spend time on their covers. Makes me really happy. So there's 16-year-old Rachel. She does not want to move to Morgan House, which is an old rundown mansion owned by her mom's boyfriend. She does not want to go, but of course she has to because she's 16. So they're relocating to St. Mary, Virginia to live with him. And she, of course, she's cut off with her friends. St. Mary's is remote. It's lonely. The best thing about it is Nick, a guy that she knows is worth keeping when he takes her to his cemetery on their first date. So that's good. Um, Rachel is struggling to get along with Jeff. He has a lot of rules and they cannot go in the basement. And you can see where all this is going, right? But there's something in Morgan House that's playing by its own rules, and that's at night. So an unknown force during the night does pull Rachel down to that forbidden basement, and it shows her harrowing visions of a strangely familiar man looking in the shadows. And then tragedy strikes the family. The visions become more frequent. They become more violent. The dead are issuing urgent warnings, and she could become part of the house forever. It just really, it starts off like, uneasy and really gets violent. And I know that Nicole Wilson is like a solid writer. I'm hoping to find out that this book will be like the other ones we talked about with like the second follow-ups. We thought they wrote a great book and we're getting another great one. And I do want to, Parliament House Press does put out some good books. So I wanted to make sure I talked about them as well.
Hell
Awesome.
yeah.
And I guess it's you again, Emily, right? Yeah.
Yes. So we're in the phase of the year where I have read none of these at this point. I have not read
Yeah.
Map of Lost Places. I have not read this next one, which is Sundown in San Ojuela by M.M. Olivas. This is from another small press, Lanternfish. And I've been hearing about this one since I think I got the press release for it, a while back, and I'm like, all right, this has piqued my interest. This is about a young woman whose aunt passes away, and so she has to head home to her hometown, which is Santa Juela of the title. I can say words. And so she undertakes this journey back there with her sister on the train, and they're going through a landscape of monsters and gods, and she's going back to the spot where she had a climactic childhood accident that left her with the power of clairvoyance. And she's grappling with family secrets, and she's grappling with supernatural secrets, and she's grappling with her childhood best friend who still lives in the town, and something is not quite right with him. So this one just has a lot of, I don't know, there's something about it that really grabbed me, and I'm really excited about it. I also love the cover, which is this sort of like painterly, like cactus and monster arm. So yeah, very hyped about this one.
I actually the Lanternfish
Mm-hmm.
books, right? Is the they reached out to me to tell me about this book, and so I'm not only going to be reviewing it, I'm going to be interviewing the author. I'm very excited about it, and they are very excited. The publisher that they've acquired a couple horror books coming up too
Great.
in
Nice.
2025. And although I will not be there, they the publisher is actually headed to the American Library Association conference in a few days. So
Great.
I'm really excited to see this one and to see what else we get.
Was it
My
Feliz?
Yeah,
Was it Feliza that you
yeah,
talked to?
it was Felisa. Yeah,
Feliza
yeah.
used to write for me, not at the Nightfire site, but actually at the site I used to run for Penguin Random House, Unbound Worlds.
Yeah,
So she used to
great.
write for me
Oh,
there. So
wow.
we've stayed in touch, and I love to see this. She'd written a couple great things about horror specifically for me when I was there. So I'm glad that she's manifesting.
Oh yeah, I'm super excited to be working with Elisa and to be covering this book and to be interviewing the author. I'm just really excited. So that'll be in the October issue of Library Journal. Um, and so I'm going to do a book that I don't want to say much about because it's a sequel. I haven't read it, but I read the first one and really liked it. And it's also a shortwave again. So that's coming also out on November 12th. And it's called Candy Cane Kills Again, the Second
Hell
Slaying
yeah.
by Brian McCauley. I read Candy Cane Kills, and I'm going to tell you when I read Candy Cane Kills, it is basically it's part of the VHS series. So there's a bunch now. That was the second one. This is gonna be the fifth one. So all the books in this series they're short, but they're the covers are like a VHS tape, but they're supposed to also be of that idea of like a rented horror movie from
Mhm.
like the 80s or 90s, and there has to be a movie that comes up in the book somehow. That's one of the rules. Um, I don't want to spoil too much for people who haven't read the first one, but Candy Cane Kills was a near perfect Christmas horror movie book. Like it's like young characters. There's a slasher. It all happens in a remote mountain cabin, and the sequel promises to begin exactly where the first one ends, which is fascinating. But the slasher character herself is awesome. The story behind it, the layering of story on top of story, the brother and sister, the sibling relationships that happened, the take, anybody's fair game to be killed. I'm just so excited to see the town come back, the people come back, and to see Candy Cane come back. So
Delightful.
definitely a good
That's
read.
Funny small world thing here is that Brian and I lived down the hall from each other our freshman year of college.
Gosh.
oh, wild.
And we didn't make the connection until StokerCon 2023 when I was watching him on a panel and I was like, I know him. And I'm like
Oh, that's
Googling him
crazy.
while I'm in the panel and going, did you go to NYU? Yep, sure enough. So I went up to him after and we made that connection and we were both just like screaming in the con. It was great.
He is also an amazing human being.
Yes, he is
Amazing.
wonderful.
He is just the best. He's also a huge fan of all the librarians. He's always like, I just want to be a librarian, but he is a film professor.
Yeah, and a screenwriter
Oh,
too.
awesome.
Yes.
Extremely cool guy.
All right, so my kind of final contribution isn't exactly, well, I guess it kind of is because one of the books is coming out in December. But I wanted to make a special note because we can't talk about Stephen Graham Jones enough. Something unexpected happened. Well, unexpected to me. I don't know if other people knew about it, but recently I'm going to tell a little story. I was reading I Was a Teenage Slasher, and he said something about someone needing to solve for X, and I know Solve for X is the name of a story that Stephen Graham Jones wrote, and I was like, oh, I can't remember what anthology that or what short story collection that's in. So I look it up. It's in After the People Lights Have Gone Off, which has been out of print since 2015 or whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna look. I don't know why. I went to Amazon and I looked up after the people lights had gone off, and I was like, that's not the cover. And then I got all excited because it had a December release date, and I was like, oh, how come no one's talking about this? And um, and then I posted a screenshot of that Amazon thing, and I said, hey, this is whatever I said. I was excited, and I posted that. And then friend of the podcast, great guy, Greg Green, got all excited and was posting about it. And another friend of the podcast, Jesse Lawrence, who's an awesome dude, he's excited and he's posting about it. And then Greg's like, oh, hey, Sadie's messaging me. She's got a deal for a cover reveal. And they haven't done it yet. So she's asking us to take our post down. And I felt so terrible. Like, it was like a couple of days later, she was going to do the cover reveal. And here we are blowing up her spot. And so he's like, yeah, Sadie's trying to reach out to you. I find Sadie's message. And I was like, I feel so terrible. And so we took down all of our social media posts and everything. But that's how I figured out, after the people lights have gone off, is being reissued in the beginning of December. And that just kind of kicked open a door, because within the next few days, Jesse, Greg, other people kind of discovered that there is a glut of reissues of Stephen Graham Jones books happening in the later part of the year. So there's 3 books that are coming out October 22nd. There is a reissue of Zombie Bake Off, which is the first Jones book that I ever read. So it has a special place in my heart. And if you want to talk about seeing a fly and being nervous about it, that book also did something. They're reissuing 3 Miles Past, which is a collection of 3 novellas, I believe. And they're reissuing The Long Trial of Nolan Dugatti, which has been my white whale for so long. And so those 3 are coming out on the same day in October. And then after the People Lights Have Gone Off is coming out December, I think 4th or something like that. It's the beginning of December. So all of that is to say, Jones is now... I talked to him last year for when Demon Theory came out, the special edition through SST. And we talked about rights and everything. And it warmed my heart to hear that he had gotten so much of his rights back, and it's been the thing he's been working on like steadily for a while. But I didn't think that meant that there was any imminent reissues. So it's just so nice that so now that people have been reading Stephen for a while, there's going to be more stuff in print that's like examples of his earlier work that people are going to have an opportunity to read. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you highlighted that too, because on my list, I don't generally have space for like reissues or like the paperback edition of something coming out. Just purely, it is a like person power issue. Like I there are simply not enough hours in the day. But then
once you do one, you got to do all of them. So
exactly.
Totally,
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled that these books are going to be back in print, and I'm thrilled that like new generations of readers are going to be able to, discover them and have those sort of those experiences that we all did. And that's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Very exciting. And I hope that carries on, because there are so many books of Stephen's that are not currently in print that are like some of the best examples of his work, I think. So, yeah.
After the People Lights went out is the first book by Stephen I read. And interestingly, in my library system, there are a bunch of copies floating around, and there is an ebook copy. So it is still getting read. But yeah, it'd be nice to have it so people can buy them.
Yep.
But then Emily and I each have one December book as well.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So mine is Private Rights by Julia Armfield. This is
So
out December
excited.
3rd from Flatiron. Her previous novel, which maybe was her debut, but check me on that, was called Our Wives Under the Sea. And she writes, these are very, very literary fiction. I mean, for whatever we want to decide that means at this particular minute in time. But this one is it's a retelling of King Lear. which I'm always here for. Like there are I'm not generally a retellings guy, but King Lear is one exception that I always make. And it's set in a nearish future where it has just been raining for as long as anyone can remember, and it has reshaped the world. And she writes these incredibly well thought out literary stories with just this like profound eeriness to them. And so I don't even know how much horror is in this one, but I'm there. I am in line. I am, if you are still in line, stay in line, right? And the other thing about this one is that it's got like, sort of arcane religious rituals, and they're the father of the three daughters. The Lear figure is like a revered architect. And so this whole story is playing out in like his grandest creation, which is a glass house, which is just what a great setting, what a great metaphor, right? So anyway, I am here for it, and I know nothing else about it beyond what I have just said, but my pre-order is in.
Same. I loved Our Wives Under the Sea. My book's also a retelling, and I'm going to be reviewing it, and it's called The Vengeance by Emma Newman, and it is also a vampire book, which is weird because I was never saw myself as a vampire person, but I'm reading all these vampire books. The Vampires of Dumas. So it's set in the swashbuckling world of the Three Musketeers, right? But we've got a female pirate, Morgane, and she grew up at sea, daughter of the fierce pirate captain of the Vengeance, raised to follow in her footsteps as the scourge of the Four Chains Trading Company. But when Anna Marie is mortally wounded, so that is her mom, who's the captain, she confesses that she is not her mother. So anyway, there's that. And then the captain of the enemy ship reveals he was paid to kill Anna Marie, her mother, and bring Morgane home to France and her real family. Desperate to learn the truth about her lineage, Morgane spares him, leaving the Vengeance and everything she knows behind. So it's a quest to in this world of decadence and darkness in which monsters vie for control of royal courts and destinies of nations. And there's bloody secrets about the Four Chains Trading Company, vampire secrets, and the truth about her real mother's death nearly 20 years before. So I get this sense that it's going to be very epic. It's going to be epic in scope, like the writing of Dumas, and it's going to be pirates, which I love, and vampires, which apparently I love again. Maybe it's because I just didn't like the books that were being written in the past. I'm just excited to read it. It's long. I know that. It's a lot of pages. It's going to be part of a series. I am on record as loving first books in series and trilogies, and then liking the others less, except with Angel of Indian Lake. But so I'm excited. I love the world building, and this retelling thing is a big deal. And so I'm glad that both the two books we talked about are you doing retellings of not really horror things.
Mm-hmm.
Not traditional horror things. I mean, King Lear has his own horrors.
Right.
But there are, I mean, it does.
I mean, the eyes,
Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited about that. And coming at the end of the year, I hope that there's space for it because there, as we were talking about, there aren't a lot of horror titles at the end of the year that we know about yet. So each of us also picked titles for right at the beginning of January that we're both really, really excited about to share as our second titles.
Yes. So mine is, because we can't get enough of this wonderful weird man on this podcast, apparently, is Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. It is his next novel. It is out January 7th from Quirk. I know Clay, great guy. I know I have made it explicitly clear to him that the second there is something for me to read here, there's a galley or a PDF or whatever, I'm like, you are under orders to send this to me. This is functionally, it's like a QAnon horror novel. It is a story of a man who goes to visit his conservative parents. He leaves his home in Brooklyn, goes to visit his conservative parents in Virginia. and they are in a trance-like state as they watch their like right-wing cable news. And when he tries to like snap them out of it, his mother attacks him violently. And from there, he ends up trying to escape back to Brooklyn because this is spreading. This is not limited to his parents. This is nationwide. And he has to basically survive the journey back to Brooklyn with, I believe, his young nephew. And I'm like, this could not be more timely, right? Like this is,
Yeah.
and sometimes timeliness can be a burden for fiction, but like this now, I mean, I feel the same way about American Rapture. Like these are books that are written specifically for the times that we live in. And I love Clay's writing so much. He's one of those authors who consistently delivers images that I can't shake. Like there's the, I just think about What Kind of Mother. I think about the horseshoe crab death.
Yeah.
Never
will leave my brain.
Never,
Never.
ever, never, ever, ever. God, he read a story in January. We were both at the Christopher Golden House of Last Resort Con up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he was reading a story called Debridement. And I don't know if you know anything about debridement as a medical procedure, but it is the scraping away of decaying flesh. And it is one of the most upsetting short stories I have ever encountered in my life. So anytime I see that he has a new book coming, I'm like, all right, yeah, just fuck me up, man. Like ruin my life. Absolutely. I'm here for it. I will gladly pay you money to destroy my psyche.
The cover's great too, and yes, Emily, I'm on the short list too to get it immediately because my review is due on August 27th. So I need a book.
Yeah.
But yes, I've been told it will be ready. So, and then I picked the other big book that's coming out at the very beginning of the year, 1 week later. So Clay is the beginning of January 7th, and then Grady Hendrix has a new book on January 16th, January 14th. And it is from Berkeley, which is where his books are published. It's called Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. And again, Grady tries to charm you with humor, but his books are getting darker and more scarier with every book. And I am all here for that. So I don't know very much about it, except the couple things that Grady has told me. And then what they are saying, it is set in Florida in the 1970s. And it follows a group of young women in a home for unwed mothers who find a guide to witchcraft. So I am definitely going to be here for this. The Southern setting, the 1970s, which is not a time he's really done. So I'm excited about that. Clearly, he's picking, again, timely, a time when they are unwed mothers, and it is a time before abortion was legal, and now it's, in Florida, not legal again. So there's definitely some timeliness here. And, he's been getting darker with every single book. I love about Grady is how and he does this on purpose. He takes a different trope with every book and he tries to explore it. And he does that on purpose. And he wants to do that. And I'm here for that as well. So I'm excited. I've been told I will get a copy in time for my review, which is due at like a week or 2 weeks after Clay's review is due. So fingers crossed. It was pushed back a little because there were some rewrites, but I know he's very happy with it. Also, very cool cover. So
very cool cover. Yeah, the lava lamp is great. Cover.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think, Rob, that's our preview.
That's a lot. We talked. Yeah, we got through it.
And there's so many other books we want to read. I want to put a plug in again for my horror genre preview, which is coming out on July 1st on Library Journal, and Emily's jump scares list, because that was used to help do it. I have a huge shopping list that goes with my especially for libraries, with the ISBN and the publisher and the everything you need to order it. But if you're going to order, I say order through Emily's list too, bookshop.org. Yeah,
thank you.
So Yeah, it's a good way to get him. But I know mine is written for libraries who can't do that. They have to order from Ingram
Yeah.
and or Different Taylor. So, but I'm excited for that to go live. Oh, and I have an interview with Rachel Harrison. I almost forgot.
Yay.
Really great interview with Rachel Harrison in that issue. So
Very cool.
I'm really excited for people to get to read that. I forgot about that when we talked about So Thirsty.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm doing an event
Awesome.
with her in late September in Massachusetts that I'm very excited about. She's so wonderful.
So fun. So fun.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us on, Rob. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. And for anybody who's listening, you just got a ton of books that are, awesome to look forward to. You can go back to our previous episode and check out what we were talking about back then. Sorry about the thumbs up on my screen. And like we said before, books don't have expiration dates. So, go listen to that list and see if there's something off of there that you wanted to check out too.
And we were right. They were all bangers.
Yep.
All bangers. Yeah. There's definitely stuff that you guys mentioned that I then read because I was like, oh, this sounds great. And you were right. So yeah, they're all awesome. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this again. And I would love to do the same thing for 2025 if possible.
Sure.
Hell
See you
yeah.
in December.
And I guess if anybody is out there and we haven't mentioned something you're excited about, feel free to reach out to us and put it on our radar as well, because obviously we want to share the love about exciting books that are coming out. So I guess that's going to wrap it up. Thanks both of you so much for 2 hours of your time. And 6 months from now, we're going to do it again, right?
Yep.
Yeah, by then Emily's book will be out and she'll have to stop hiding to hear people.
You'll never
talk
catch
about
me.
But I will be frantically trying to finish my book. So there, we'll be in a different loop.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and then what goes around comes around. We'll be talking about your book next year. So
Yeah, exactly.
If all goes well.
Thank you so much for having us, Rob. This is great.
Yeah.
It's always fun to hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.